What if the discomfort you've been feeling isn't insecurity, but awareness? Most men don't realize this until it's too late. They sense a shift, a subtle change in energy, a quiet distance that wasn't there before. But instead of listening to it, they silence it. They tell themselves they're overthinking. They choose comfort over clarity. Here's the truth most men are never taught. Betrayal rarely arrives loudly. It doesn't come with dramatic confessions or obvious proof. It enters quietly through small inconsistencies, emotional gaps, and behaviors that feel off but are easy to explain away. And because men are conditioned to trust logic over intuition, they ignore the very signals designed to protect them. This video is not about turning you into a suspicious man. It's not about blaming women or feeding paranoia. It's about understanding human psychology. When emotional and physical intimacy shifts, the body and behavior respond. Patterns change, energy moves, and those changes leave traces that cannot be fully hidden. If you've ever felt that tightness in your chest when she looks at you differently, if you've noticed moments where the connection felt weaker without knowing why, you're not alone, and you're not imagining it. Awareness begins when you stop dismissing what you feel and start observing what's actually happening. By the end of this video, you'll understand the psychological signs most men overlook, the signals that reveal when something has changed beneath the surface. Not so you react emotionally, but so you regain clarity, control, and self-respect. Because the strongest men aren't blind. They're aware.
To understand the signs, you first need to understand one core psychological truth. Intimacy does not end the moment two people separate. Especially for women, intimacy is deeply tied to emotion, memory, and the nervous system. It leaves an imprint. And that imprint doesn't disappear just because someone decides to act normal afterward. Human beings are not switches that turn feelings on and off. When emotional or physical closeness is shared, the brain releases bonding chemicals that influence mood, behavior, and perception. This is not opinion. It's biology. When that connection happens with someone else, it creates a contrast that the subconscious struggles to hide. This is why behavior shifts even when there is no intention to reveal anything. A woman may genuinely want everything to feel the same with you, but her body and mind are still processing a different emotional experience. That internal conflict creates leakage. Not dramatic mistakes, but subtle inconsistencies. Energy can't be divided cleanly. Attention changes. Emotional presence weakens. Reactions become delayed, exaggerated, or muted. And while words can be controlled, patterns are much harder to fake consistently. This is where most men get confused. They look for proof instead of patterns. But psychology doesn't reveal itself through single moments. It reveals itself through repeated shifts in behavior, tone, and connection. Once you understand that intimacy leaves psychological traces, the signs stop feeling mysterious. They start feeling logical. And logic, when combined with awareness, gives you power instead of fear.
One of the first signs most men feel, but struggle to explain, is a sudden shift in physical affection. Not the obvious kind, but the subtle kind. The kind you sense in her touch, her closeness, and the emotional weight behind physical moments. When a woman is emotionally aligned with you, physical affection feels natural and instinctive. There's warmth in it, presence, a sense that she's fully there. But when her intimacy has recently been invested elsewhere, that connection can change in one of two opposing ways. The first is emotional coldness. Her touch may feel lighter, shorter, or less engaged. Hugs end quicker. Kisses feel shallow. Physical closeness feels polite rather than passionate. It's not that she avoids you completely, it's that her body doesn't respond the same way. And that difference is something your nervous system notices immediately, even if your mind tries to rationalize it. The second reaction is the opposite, overcompensation. She may suddenly become unusually affectionate, initiating closeness more than before, offering excessive compliments, or acting overly warm. On the surface, it feels positive, but beneath it, the affection feels forced, rushed, or inconsistent with her normal behavior. Psychology shows that guilt often drives exaggerated actions meant to restore balance or suppress suspicion. Neither reaction on its own is proof. The key is contrast. When affection no longer matches her established pattern, something has shifted internally. Your discomfort doesn't come from paranoia, it comes from misalignment. Intuition responds to emotional consistency. When closeness feels either unusually distant or unnaturally intense, don't dismiss it. Physical affection is not just behavior, it's communication. And when that communication changes without explanation, it's often the first visible crack beneath the surface.
In the modern world, the phone is more than a device. It's a gateway to emotional connection, privacy, and secrecy. That's why changes in phone behavior are one of the most revealing signs when something beneath the surface has shifted. When a woman has nothing to hide, her relationship with her phone remains consistent. It's casual, predictable, unremarkable. But when emotional energy is being invested elsewhere, her attachment to that device often changes in subtle but noticeable ways. You may notice she suddenly keeps her phone face down or within reach at all times. She might carry it with her from room to room or take it into private spaces where she never used to. Her body may angle the screen away from you, or her tone may shift slightly when a message arrives. These aren't conscious decisions. They are protective reflexes driven by the subconscious. Sometimes the behavior flips entirely. Instead of guarding her phone, she may leave it out in plain sight, unlocked, almost as if she wants you to notice how open she's being. Psychology refers to this as reverse signaling. It's an attempt to project transparency so questioning stops altogether. But excessive openness can be just as revealing as secrecy when it appears suddenly. Timing also matters. Notifications arriving at unusual hours, stepping away to answer calls, or becoming vague about who she's communicating with all signal a disruption in routine. The explanation is less important than the pattern change. Men often ignore these details to avoid seeming insecure. But awareness is not insecurity. Consistency builds trust. When consistency breaks without reason, it deserves attention. The phone doesn't create secrets. It exposes where emotional energy is being guarded.
Another powerful sign appears in how she speaks to you, not in what she says, but in the rhythm, depth, and emotional weight behind her words. Communication carries energy, and when that energy shifts, it's rarely accidental. You may notice she becomes unusually brief. Conversations that once flowed naturally now feel flat or mechanical. Her responses shrink to short acknowledgements, as if her emotional capacity has already been spent elsewhere. This isn't just distraction. It's emotional withdrawal expressed through language. In other cases, the opposite happens. She becomes overly talkative, filling silence with unnecessary details, jokes, or explanations. Silence creates space for reflection, and reflection can bring discomfort. Excessive talking often functions as a distraction from internal tension. Both extremes are signs of imbalance. Listen closely to how she answers simple questions. Are there small pauses before she responds? Does she repeat herself or over-explain ordinary details? Psychology refers to these as micro-hesitations. They occur when the brain is filtering information rather than recalling it naturally. A person grounded in truth speaks with flow. A person carrying something unspoken edits reality in real time. Tone matters as much as content. A slight defensiveness, a forced cheerfulness, or an emotional flatness, where warmth once existed, all point to internal conflict. These changes are subtle, which is why most men miss them. They don't want to believe something has changed, so they dismiss what they hear. But communication always reveals inner alignment. When her words no longer feel congruent with her energy, trust what you're sensing. Emotional shifts speak long before confessions ever do. Language is one of the clearest mirrors of emotional connection, yet it's one of the most overlooked signals. When a woman feels deeply connected to you, she uses your name naturally and comfortably. Your name carries emotional weight. It reflects familiarity, closeness, and presence. When that connection begins to drift, subtle changes appear. She may stop using your name as often, replacing it with neutral terms or avoiding direct address altogether. This isn't accidental. Emotional distance often reduces personal language because the bond behind it has weakened. Sometimes the shift goes in the opposite direction. She may suddenly overuse pet names or affectionate terms that weren't part of your normal dynamic. While this can seem positive on the surface, psychology suggests it can be a form of emotional pacification. Generic affection is easier to give when genuine emotional presence is divided. These changes rarely stand out on their own, which is why most men ignore them. But relationships are built on patterns, not isolated moments. When the way she addresses you no longer feels natural or consistent with her past behavior, something beneath the surface has changed. Words are chosen instinctively when emotions are aligned. When they feel rehearsed or altered, it's often because the emotional foundation behind them has shifted. Paying attention to these details doesn't make you suspicious. It makes you observant, and observation is the beginning of clarity. The eyes reveal what words work hard to hide. No matter how controlled someone tries to be, the eyes often expose emotional truth in ways the conscious mind can't fully manage. This is why shifts in eye contact are one of the most reliable psychological indicators that something has changed. When a woman is emotionally aligned with you, her eye contact feels natural. It's relaxed, warm, and responsive. There's a sense of presence behind it. But when her intimacy has recently been divided, her gaze may change in noticeable ways. She might avoid holding eye contact, breaking it quickly as if staying connected feels uncomfortable. Not out of shyness, but out of inner conflict. In some cases, the opposite occurs. She may hold eye contact longer than usual, almost intensely. This isn't confidence, it's overcorrection. When someone tries too hard to appear open, the effort itself becomes visible. Authentic connection doesn't need to be proven. Watch for micro-expressions. These are brief, involuntary flashes of emotion that appear and disappear in a fraction of a second. A flicker of discomfort when you ask a simple question, a quick tightening around the eyes, a forced smile that arrives late or fades too quickly. These expressions bypass conscious control and reveal emotional tension. Another key detail is presence. Does she look at you, or does she look through you? When emotional attention has shifted elsewhere, the eyes lose their depth. The spark dulls, focus scatters. This isn't imagination, it's psychological displacement. You don't need to stare or test her, just observe. When her words say one thing, but her eyes consistently say another, trust the eyes. They speak the language the subconscious can't silence. Human beings are creatures of habit, especially in close relationships. When emotional investment is stable, routines form naturally. Calls happen at the same times. Messages follow familiar rhythms. Time together has a predictable flow. This is why changes in routine are one of the most revealing signs that something has shifted beneath the surface. When a woman has recently given emotional or physical attention elsewhere, her patterns often change without a clear explanation. Maybe she used to call you after work, and now those calls are delayed or skipped. Maybe her mornings start earlier, her nights end later, or her weekends suddenly fill with vague plans. The reason she gives matters less than the disruption itself. Psychologically, this happens because attention is finite. When energy is redirected, existing habits weaken. She may still be present with you physically, but her time and focus no longer move in sync with yours. This creates gaps you can feel, even if you can't immediately explain them. Another detail to notice is preparation. A sudden increase in attention to appearance, longer time getting ready, or heightened awareness of how she looks when going out alone can signal a shift in how she's relating to herself. Often, this comes from external validation being replayed internally. Men tend to rationalize these changes as stress or coincidence. But consistent behavior doesn't change randomly. Patterns tell the truth long before words do. When her routines with you are disrupted without a meaningful reason, it's not paranoia to notice, it's awareness. One of the most painful signs isn't dramatic at all. It's quiet. It's the slow fading of emotional presence. When a woman has recently invested intimacy elsewhere, her emotional connection with you often becomes inconsistent, shallow, or strangely hollow. You may notice she listens less intently. Conversations that once felt alive now feel distant. She responds, but without depth. Her laughter comes slower. Her warmth feels rationed rather than freely given. It's subtle, like a light slowly dimming in a room you're used to being bright. In some cases, this withdrawal shows up as unnecessary conflict. Small issues suddenly turn into arguments. This isn't really about frustration. Psychologically, conflict can create emotional distance, which helps reduce internal guilt. Pushing you away makes the inner conflict easier to manage. In other cases, the opposite happens. She becomes overly agreeable. She avoids disagreement entirely. She seems calm, unbothered, and easygoing in ways that feel unnatural. This isn't peace, it's detachment. When someone emotionally checks out, they stop investing enough to argue. Men often misinterpret these signs as mood changes or stress, but emotional withdrawal has a distinct feeling. You don't feel challenged, inspired, or deeply seen anymore. You feel tolerated. This shift isn't about anger or dislike. It's about emotional energy being redirected. And when that happens, the bond weakens quietly, long before any obvious decision is made. Recognizing this early doesn't make you weak. It gives you the chance to respond with clarity instead of confusion.
One of the clearest signs that something has shifted is not found in what she does, but in what she no longer seeks from you. When a woman is emotionally connected, she naturally looks to her partner for validation, attention, reassurance, and shared meaning. When that connection weakens, those needs quietly fade. You may notice your compliments no longer land the same way. She doesn't light up when you notice her, doesn't lean into your presence, doesn't seem affected by your approval or concern. It's not that she suddenly became independent overnight. It's that her emotional fulfillment is being sourced elsewhere. Another subtle change is how much of her inner world she shares. The small stories, the random thoughts, the "you won't believe what happened today" moments begin to disappear. Those details don't vanish into nothing. They're usually being shared somewhere else. Emotional intimacy is built through shared worlds, and when that world stops being shared with you, something fundamental has changed. Even her body language reflects this shift. The spontaneous touches, the instinctive closeness, the unconscious ways she reached for you begin to fade. She may still go through familiar motions, but the energy behind them feels empty. Desire and connection cannot be sustained through effort alone. They flow naturally when emotional alignment exists. When you feel that you're no longer the source of what she once needed, it's not your imagination. It's a signal that her emotional priorities have changed.
Facing these signs is uncomfortable, and that's exactly why most men avoid them. It's easier to doubt yourself than to confront the possibility that something meaningful has changed. But discomfort is not your enemy. Denial is. Awareness doesn't mean accusation. It doesn't mean reacting emotionally or jumping to conclusions. It means seeing clearly. When patterns shift, when energy feels misaligned, when your intuition repeatedly signals that something is off, the strongest response is not panic. It's presence. Men are often taught that trusting their instincts makes them insecure. That's false. Insecurity comes from ignoring reality and hoping it fixes itself. Confidence comes from trusting your perception and knowing you can handle the truth, whatever it turns out to be. These signs are not guarantees. They are signals. Signals invite reflection, conversation, and boundaries, not obsession. The goal is not to control someone else's behavior. The goal is to protect your self-respect and emotional stability. When you stop lying to yourself, you regain choice. You are no longer blindsided by outcomes you felt coming all along. You can respond instead of react. You can decide what you accept and what you don't. A man who sees clearly is not weak. He is grounded. He doesn't need proof written in stone to honor what he feels. Awareness gives you leverage, not over her, but over your own life. And that is where real power begins.
Let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever felt that quiet inner warning telling you something wasn't right, only to ignore it and later realize it was accurate all along? You're not alone. Almost every man who has faced betrayal looks back and recognizes the signs he explained away. This conversation isn't about blame or bitterness. It's about shared awareness. When men speak openly about these experiences, it breaks the cycle of denial and helps others recognize patterns before they're hurt. If this video gave you clarity, share your thoughts in the comments. Not to expose anyone, but to help another man who may be confused. doubting himself, or questioning his own perception. Your experience might be the insight someone else needs right now. If you found value here, support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. And if you know a man who needs this perspective, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to him. Awareness grows when it's shared, and clarity is something every man deserves.